When my phone rang that Sunday morning, I was sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the mist lift from the garden. The ringtone made me smile. It was the custom tone I'd set for my son, Daniel. He didn't call often these days, not since he'd moved in with Claire. Our relationship had become polite but distant, like neighbors who exchange waves but never visit. Still, I answered on the first ring, eager to hear his voice. "Morning, Mom," he said cheerfully, his tone unusually light. "Claire and I just wanted to tell you some news." I straightened in my chair, my heart fluttering with the instinctive excitement only a mother can feel. "Oh, what's going on?" There was a pause, and I could hear Claire giggling softly in the background. "We got married yesterday." The words hit me like cold water. "You what?" I asked, unsure if I had heard correctly. "We got married," he repeated, laughing nervously. "Just a small ceremony, nothing fancy. We didn't want to make a big deal of it." For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. My son, my only child, had gotten married without me there. I forced a smile into my voice, though my throat was tight. "Well, congratulations, I suppose. I hope it was beautiful." "It was," Claire's voice chimed in, bright and proud. "We thought it would be less stressful this way. You know how weddings can get complicated." Complicated. That word stung, as if including me in the most important day of his life was a burden. "Of course," I murmured, staring at the coffee that had gone cold. "I just wish I had known. It all happened so fast," Daniel said quickly. "We'll come by soon to show you the pictures." "That would be nice," I replied, though I already felt the emptiness spreading inside me like frost. After we hung up, I sat in silence, the stillness of the morning now heavy with hurt. The garden, which had always comforted me, felt distant. The flowers I had planted when Daniel was a boy, sunflowers, he once said, looked like happy faces, seemed to bow their heads in quiet sympathy. My mind replayed every moment I had imagined for his wedding, me helping him pick the suit, me meeting the in-laws, me crying when he said, "I do." I had been erased from all of it. Later that afternoon, my friend Margaret dropped by. She was my neighbor and confidant, a woman with more empathy than most therapists. "You look like someone stole your sunshine," she said, settling onto the porch swing beside me. I told her everything. She listened quietly, her brow furrowed. When I finished, she sighed deeply. "That's cruel, Nora. You deserve to be there. You're his mother." "Maybe they just wanted something simple," I offered weakly. "Daniel's always hated big events." "Simple is one thing. Excluding your own mother is another," she said firmly. "Don't make excuses for them." Her words echoed what my heart already knew. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of the last time Daniel had visited. He and Claire had come over for dinner, and I had asked when they planned to set a date. Claire had smiled politely and said, "Oh, we'll let you know soon." She must have already been planning it. Maybe even then she knew I wouldn't be part of it. The realization twisted something deep inside me. Over the next few days, I tried to keep busy. I cleaned, I baked, I even volunteered at the library, anything to keep my mind from circling back to the betrayal. But it followed me like a shadow. Every time I passed the hallway where Daniel's childhood photos hung, I felt the sting again. One picture in particular caught my attention. Daniel at 7 years old, grinning widely, a missing front tooth, holding a paper crown he had made for me on Mother's Day. "You're the queen, Mom," he had said proudly that day. I touched the frame and whispered, "What happened to us, Danny?" 3 days later, they came to visit. When I opened the door, Claire was the first to step in, radiant in a new floral dress. Daniel followed, carrying a cake box. "We brought something sweet," he said, smiling. "Thought we'd celebrate properly." Celebrate, the word felt ironic. I made tea while they sat on the couch showing me photos on Claire's phone. A courthouse, a smiling clerk, Claire in a simple white dress, Daniel wearing a gray suit. They looked happy, I couldn't deny that. "It was just perfect," Claire said. "No drama, no stress. Just us." I forced a smile. "You both look wonderful," I said softly. "I just wish I'd been there to see it in person." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, it wasn't personal. We just wanted to keep it small." "I understand," I said, though my voice trembled. "I only hope that next time there's a big event in your life, you'll remember I still exist." Claire laughed lightly, misreading the pain behind my words. "Of course, Nora. We'll definitely include you next time." Next time, as if I were some distant relative, not the woman who had raised him. When they left, I sat staring at the empty teacups, the echo of their laughter still in the air. I realized that what hurt most wasn't the exclusion. It was the casualness of it, the way they didn't even think I'd mind. Later that night, Margaret called. "How did it go?" she asked. "They came by, showed me pictures." And I smiled like everything was fine, I whispered. "But it's not, Margaret. Something inside me broke a little today." "Then don't let it stay broken," she said. "You need to understand what's really going on. Sometimes people push away the ones who remind them who they used to be." Her words lingered in my mind long after we hung up. Maybe she was right. Maybe Daniel wasn't rejecting me. Maybe he was rejecting the part of himself that still needed me, but understanding didn't make it hurt any less. I went to bed with tears drying on my cheeks, clutching the small stuffed bear Daniel had given me when he was 10. "For when you miss me," he had said then. I never imagined those words would feel prophetic. The next morning, I woke to sunlight spilling across the bed, but it didn't feel warm. It felt like an interrogation, bright and unrelenting. I got up, wrapped my robe around me, and went straight to the kitchen. The silence of the house was deafening, the kind that makes you realize how much of your life has been filled with other people's noise. Daniel's laughter used to echo in these rooms, bouncing between the walls when he'd run around pretending to be a superhero. Now, there was just the ticking clock and the hum of the refrigerator. I poured myself coffee and sat at the table, scrolling absent-mindedly through social media. That's when I saw it. A photo Claire had posted. Her caption read, "Married my best friend yesterday. Couldn't be happier." My son stood beside her, grinning like the world belonged to him. The comments were full of congratulations, heart emojis, and people saying how beautiful she looked. Not one mention of me. It was as though I didn't exist, as though I'd never been part of the story that led to that moment. Something inside me hardened. I decided I wasn't going to sit around and wonder. I needed to know why. Why didn't they want me there? What had I done so wrong that my presence had become inconvenient? So I called Daniel that afternoon. He answered after a few rings, his tone cautious. "Hey, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can we talk?" "Sure," he said, though I could tell he wasn't thrilled. "I've just been thinking about the wedding," I said, "and I can't shake the feeling that you didn't want me there." There was a pause. "It's not like that," he said finally. "Claire thought, well, we both thought it would be simpler. You know how you get emotional at big events, and we didn't want any tension." "Tension?" I repeated, my heart clenching. "Have I ever caused tension at one of your milestones, Daniel?" He hesitated. "No, but what?" Claire just wanted things calm. Her parents didn't even come either. "That's not true," I said softly. "I saw the photos. Her sister was there, her cousin too." Silence. "It wasn't meant to hurt you, Mom." I closed my eyes. "Then why does it feel like it did?" He didn't have an answer. After a few more awkward sentences, the call ended. I sat there for a long time afterward, my hands trembling around the phone. Margaret came by again later. She brought a pie and her steady presence, the kind that fills the air with quiet comfort. "So?" she asked gently. "Any clarity?" "Just excuses," I said. "Apparently my emotions are too much for a wedding." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. Claire's influence is all over that explanation. I didn't respond, but I knew she was right. Daniel had never spoken that way before Claire. There was something about her, polished, charming, but distant, that had always felt calculated. She had a way of making people feel like they owed her understanding without her ever offering any in return. "Maybe I should talk to her," I said after a while. "Woman to woman. Just clear the air." "That's risky," Margaret warned. "You might end up giving her more power." "Maybe," I admitted, "but I can't live in this silence." The next day, I drove into town and stopped by the boutique where Claire worked. She was arranging a display of handbags when she noticed me. Her expression flickered, surprise, then composure. "Nora, what a nice surprise," she said brightly. "I didn't know you'd be stopping by." "I thought it was time we talked," I said, managing a polite smile. "About the wedding." She hesitated, then gestured toward a small seating area in the corner. "Of course." We sat down, and I could feel the weight of unspoken tension settling between us. "Claire," I began, "I just need to understand. Why wasn't I told? Why was I left out?" She crossed her legs delicately, her tone light but distant. "Nora, it wasn't personal. We just wanted to avoid any family drama. You know how emotional weddings can get?" "But I'm not family drama," I said quietly. "I'm his mother." She tilted her head, a sympathetic smile playing on her lips. "Of course you are. But sometimes Daniel feels pressured around you. He said you can be intense." The word cut through me. "Intense?" I repeated. "I'm his mother. I worry. I care. If that's intense, then so be it." "It's not a bad thing," she said, though her eyes told me she meant exactly that. Daniel just needed a day that was about us, without expectations. I stared at her, realizing in that moment that there was no reaching her. Claire had built a wall around Daniel, a beautiful, polite wall that smiled while it excluded. I stood up slowly. "I hope you both have a happy life," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "But one day, you'll understand what it feels like to be shut out of something you helped build." Her expression faltered for a second, but she said nothing. I left the boutique with my head high, though my heart felt heavy as stone. That night, I sat alone again, the house echoing with the silence of everything unsaid. I looked at Daniel's old baby blanket, folded neatly in the cedar chest. I'd kept it all these years, thinking one day I'd give it to his child. Now, I wasn't even sure if I'd be invited to meet that child when the time came. As I closed the lid, I whispered into the quiet, maybe some wounds aren't meant to heal easily. Still, a part of me refused to give up. I decided to write Daniel a letter. Not an emotional one, not one filled with accusations or pain, but something honest, a mother's truth. I poured my heart into it. How I had dreamed of that day, how I would have stood quietly in the back just to witness his happiness, how I wanted nothing but to be part of his life. I sealed it, unsure if I'd send it. But writing it felt like reclaiming something, my voice, my dignity, my place in the story that had almost erased me. Before going to bed, I whispered to myself, the same way the narrator always did in those videos 2 days passed before I gathered the courage to actually mail the letter. I stood in front of the post office, the envelope trembling slightly in my hands, Daniel's name written neatly across the front. It wasn't anger that guided me. It was the need to be heard, to make sure my silence wasn't mistaken for acceptance. I slipped the letter into the box and felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. I didn't know if he would read it or if Claire would intercept it first, but at least I had done something. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks, but peace is a fragile thing. It doesn't last long when your heart is tied to someone else's choices. The next afternoon, Daniel showed up at my door. No warning, no call. When I opened it, he stood there with the letter in his hand, his expression unreadable. "You wrote me this," he said quietly. I nodded. I did. He stepped inside without waiting to be invited, closing the door behind him. "Mom, why couldn't we just leave it alone? You keep making things more complicated." "Complicated," I repeated, that word again like a thorn. "I'm trying to talk to you, Daniel. I'm trying to understand why you didn't want me there. It's not about wanting or not wanting," he said, pacing now. "It's about peace. Claire's been under a lot of stress and I'm the cause of it?" "Sometimes, yes," he said before he could stop himself. The words hung in the air like poison. I felt them land deep, somewhere beneath my ribs. "I see," I whispered. "You've changed, Daniel. Or maybe I just didn't realize how easily you could forget who helped you become this man." "That's not fair," he said quickly. "You know I love you, Mom." "Do you?" I asked softly. Because love without respect isn't love. It's convenience. He looked at me helplessly, like a child caught between guilt and pride. "You're overthinking this. We just wanted to start our marriage our way." "And what about family?" I asked. "What about the people who carried you to this point?" "We'll include you more now," he said, reaching for the doorknob, his tone final, dismissive even. "But please, don't write me letters like that again. It makes Claire uncomfortable." My heart broke quietly then, not with a loud snap, but with a silent, hollow crack. "You can go," I said, my voice steady even as tears burned behind my eyes. He hesitated for a moment, as if expecting me to stop him, but I didn't. I watched him leave, his figure shrinking down the walkway until he disappeared beyond the hedges. The letter, creased, handled, rejected, remained clutched in his hand. When the door closed, the air felt thinner. I walked to the window and stared out, watching a bird land on the fence. It hopped twice, then flew away again, free and unbothered. I envied it. That night, I found myself replaying everything I had done as a mother. The nights I stayed up when he was sick, the lunches I packed, the sacrifices I made. All of it, invisible now, erased by time and marriage vows. I tried to convince myself that maybe this was just a phase, that maybe distance was what grown children needed to become their own people. But deep down, I knew something had shifted permanently. Over the next week, I didn't hear from him. No calls, no messages, just silence. Until one evening, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. It was Claire. "Hi, Nora. Hope you're well. Just wanted to let you know Daniel's been really busy with work. He'll reach out soon. Take care." No mention of the letter, no acknowledgement of our confrontation. Just a polite wall of words perfectly crafted to say nothing. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Instead, I went to Margaret's house the next morning. She was watering her hydrangeas when I arrived. "You look like you've aged 10 years in a week," she said gently, setting down her watering can. I told her everything. About the letter, the visit, the words that still echoed in my head. She listened quietly, her expression soft with concern. "You can't keep chasing him, Nora," she said finally. "He's under her spell, and the more you push, the tighter that web gets." "But he's my son," I said, tears welling again. "I can't just let him go." "Sometimes," she said, putting a hand on mine, "love means stepping back. Let him see what the world looks like without your steady presence. He'll come around when the silence becomes louder than your voice ever was." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the emptiness that followed each day was suffocating. To fill it, I started volunteering more at the library. Reading to the children during story hour. Their laughter was a balm, a reminder of simpler times. One afternoon, as I was packing up books, a little boy looked up at me and said, "You sound like my grandma. She tells stories just like you." The comment caught me off guard, and I smiled through the sting in my chest. "Your grandma must be very kind," I said. "She is," he replied. "She always says, 'Family is the story that never ends.'" His words stayed with me. Maybe family wasn't something that could be erased by distance or decisions. Maybe it was still there, woven into the quiet places between words. That night, I decided to start writing again, not to Daniel this time, but for myself. I began a journal, documenting each day not as a record of pain, but as a path to healing. I wrote about the garden, about Margaret's advice, about the small joys I was learning to notice again, the way the light hit the leaves in the morning, the sound of rain against the roof. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to find peace in the fragments. Still, sometimes I'd sit on the porch at dusk and whisper to the wind, "Daniel, I hope you're happy, but I hope you remember who I am." Weeks turned into months, and though time softened the edges of my pain, it didn't erase it. The wound simply became quieter, less visible, like a scar that still ached when the weather changed. I filled my days with small routines, watering the garden, baking bread, organizing community events. But no matter how busy I kept myself, there was always that empty chair at my kitchen table, the one Daniel used to sit in when he'd tell me about his dreams. One afternoon in early spring, I received an invitation in the mail. The handwriting wasn't familiar, but the return address made my heart skip. Daniel and Claire. I held the envelope as if it might burn me. Inside was a pastel card decorated with tiny gold leaves. Housewarming party. Join us in celebrating our new home. I stared at the date. It was in 2 weeks. Beneath the printed words, Daniel had scrawled a small note. "Would love for you to come, Mom. It would mean a lot." I sat down heavily, the letter trembling in my hands. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. A doorway cracked open, a chance to see if the pieces could be fitted back together. Margaret came over that evening and found me still holding the invitation. "So," she said, raising an eyebrow, "are you going?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to. Part of me thinks it's too soon." "Too soon for healing or too soon to risk getting hurt again?" she asked. I sighed. "Both." She placed a gentle hand on mine. "Then go. But not for them. For you. Go and see if there's anything left to rebuild." Her words stayed with me. On the day of the party, I put on a pale blue dress, the one Daniel had once said made me look like the sky, and baked an apple tart, his favorite. When I arrived, the house was beautiful. White shutters, a garden full of roses, a front porch that looked like something out of a magazine. I stood at the gate for a moment, gathering courage. Then Daniel appeared at the door, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Mom!" He hurried over, pulling me into a hug. It caught me off guard, that warmth, and for a moment I let myself breathe. "I'm glad you came," he said. "I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I admitted, managing a small smile. Inside, the house was full of people. Friends, neighbors, Claire's family. I recognized some faces from the wedding photos. The air smelled of fresh paint and vanilla candles. Claire approached, elegant as ever, holding 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "Nora," she said warmly, "I'm so happy you could make it." "Thank you for inviting me," I replied, forcing my voice to stay even. "The house is lovely." "We worked hard on it," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Daniel insisted we include some things that reminded him of home." My eyes drifted to a framed photo on the mantel. Daniel, at 10 years old, holding a fishing rod, standing next to me at the lake. I hadn't seen that picture in years. My chest tightened. "That's one of my favorites," I said softly. "I'm glad he kept it." "He has a whole box of old photos," Claire said. "You raised him well." For a moment there was something genuine in her tone, something almost kind. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope after all. The evening passed in a blur of polite conversations and cautious smiles. Daniel moved between guests, laughing, pouring drinks, glowing in that new home pride. Every now and then he'd glance my way, and I could see the old warmth flicker back into his eyes. When most of the guests had left, I helped him gather the dishes. Claire was talking to someone near the door, her laughter ringing softly. "You look happy," I said quietly, as we loaded plates into the sink. "I am," he replied, glancing at me. "And I want you to be too." "I'm trying," I said. "It's not easy to feel replaced." He paused, his brow furrowing. "You're not replaced, Mom. You're part of my life. Always will be." "Then why did it feel like I was an afterthought?" I asked. He set the dish towel down. "I don't know how to answer that. I made mistakes. I thought keeping things simple would make life easier, but I see now it only made things harder." His honesty caught me by surprise. "That's all I needed to hear," I said softly. "Not excuses, just truth." We stood there for a while, the kind of silence that heals instead of hurts. Claire joined us then, her hand resting lightly on Daniel's arm. "We should show your mom the garden," she said. "You'll like it, Nora. Daniel designed most of it." We stepped outside and I couldn't help but smile. The garden was beautiful, rows of lavender, small stepping stones, and in the corner, a patch of sunflowers. "He said these reminded him of you," Claire said. My breath caught. For the first time, I saw something different in her eyes. Not competition, not control, but perhaps a small thread of understanding. "They were his favorite when he was little," I said quietly. "I used to tell him they were flowers that looked for the light." Claire nodded. "Then I suppose it makes sense that he planted them here." It was such a simple exchange, but it felt like a door had opened between us. Maybe small, maybe fragile, but real. As the evening faded into twilight, Daniel walked me to my car. "Thanks for coming, Mom," he said. "It meant a lot." "You're welcome," I said. "Just promise me something. Anything. Don't shut me out again, even if things get complicated." He nodded, his eyes softening. "I promise." I smiled then, truly smiled for the first time in months. On the drive home, I felt lighter, as if some invisible weight had finally shifted. When I got back, the house didn't feel as lonely. I walked into the kitchen, set down my purse, and looked at the framed photo of Daniel on the counter. "Maybe we're finding our way back," I whispered. The days that followed the housewarming party felt strangely calm, like the quiet after a long storm. For the first time in almost a year, Daniel began calling me again, not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection. We spoke about everyday things: the new rosebush he had planted, the small leak in my garden hose, the recipe for lemon cake he'd always loved. There were still awkward pauses, moments when old wounds peeked through, but there was also laughter again, cautious but real. One afternoon, as I was pruning the geraniums, the phone rang. "Hi, Mom," Daniel said, his voice bright. "I have some news." My heart skipped. "Good news, I hope." "The best," he said. "Claire's pregnant." I froze, the pruning shears slipping from my hand into the soil. "Pregnant?" I repeated softly. "Yes, we found out last week. We wanted to wait for confirmation before telling anyone." "That's wonderful, Daniel." The words came out softer than I intended, a mix of joy and fear tightening in my chest. "How's she feeling?" "A little tired, but happy," he said. "We both are. And Mom, this time I don't want you to find out from someone else. I want you to be part of it." Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. "Thank you, Daniel," I whispered. "That means more to me than you can imagine." That night, I sat on the porch under the stars, thinking about what it meant to be a grandmother. I imagined tiny hands, soft laughter, the smell of baby powder, but I also imagined the tension that might return, the old wounds reopening. Was Claire really ready to include me, or was Daniel's excitement painting the picture rosier than it was? Still, I decided to have faith. Not blind faith, but cautious hope. A few weeks later, they invited me to dinner. I baked a tray of lasagna and brought a bouquet of white lilies. Claire greeted me at the door, her stomach already showing a soft curve. "Nora, come in," she said, her tone warm but measured. "You look lovely." "So do you," I replied. "Pregnancy suits you." She smiled faintly. "Thank you. I feel different. It's still surreal." Daniel appeared behind her, beaming. "Dinner's ready." Come on in." We sat together at the table, and for the first time it felt like a real family dinner. There were no veiled comments, no tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. We talked about names, nursery colors, and baby clothes. I kept my suggestions light, careful not to overstep. After dinner, as we cleared the dishes, Claire hesitated before speaking. "Nora, there's something I'd like to ask you." My stomach tightened. "Of course. Would you be willing to be in the delivery room with us? Daniel said you were with his mother when he was born. I think it would be special if you were there." I blinked in surprise, unsure if I'd heard correctly. "You want me there?" "If you'd like to," she said. "You're part of this family after all." For a moment I couldn't speak. My throat ached from holding back tears. "I would be honored," I managed to say. And for the first time I saw something genuine in Claire's eyes. Trust. The months that followed were a kind of redemption. I went with her to doctor's appointments, helped decorate the nursery, and even attended a prenatal class with her. We still had our differences, but there was mutual respect now, and a fragile sense of understanding. One afternoon, as we painted the nursery walls a soft shade of green, Claire suddenly said, "You know, I used to think you didn't like me." I paused, the paintbrush in midair. "And I used to think you didn't want me in your life," I replied. She smiled faintly. "I guess we were both wrong. Maybe we just needed time," I said. "Sometimes love doesn't arrive neatly packaged. Sometimes it has to be built slowly." She nodded. "You're right. I'm sorry for how things started. I should have told you about the wedding. It wasn't fair." "It's in the past," I said quietly. "What matters is that we're here now." For the rest of the afternoon, we painted in silence, the kind that felt easy, like two women finally finding common ground. When the baby arrived, a beautiful girl named Lila, it was the happiest day of my life. I stood by Claire's side as she held the tiny bundle, tears streaming down her cheeks. Daniel kissed her forehead and whispered, "You did it." When he handed Lila to me, my hands trembled. "Hello, my little sunflower," I whispered. "Welcome to the world." From that moment, everything changed. I became Grandma Nora, the one who rocked Lila to sleep, sang old lullabies, and took her for long walks in the garden. Daniel and Claire visited often. And though life wasn't perfect, it was peaceful. Still, sometimes, late at night, I'd think back to that first betrayal, the day I found out they'd married without me, and I'd wonder how different things could have been if they had simply told me the truth from the beginning. One evening, when Lila was 6 months old, Daniel called. "Mom, Claire and I want to take a trip for a few days. Would you be willing to watch Lila?" "Of course," I said immediately. "You know I'd love to." They dropped her off the next morning, and for 3 glorious days my house was filled with baby laughter again. But on the 4th day, something unexpected happened. A man came to my door with an envelope. "Delivery for Mrs. Nora Bennett," he said. I signed for it and closed the door, puzzled. Inside was a legal document. My heart pounded as I read the words. Notice of Temporary Guardianship Authorization. My hands shook. Claire and Daniel had signed over temporary guardianship of Lila to me for the duration of international travel. I didn't understand. Why would they need to do that for a short trip? I called Daniel immediately. No answer. I tried Claire. Straight to voicemail. The house felt suddenly too quiet. My heart began to race. Where had they gone? Why hadn't they told me? I sat on the couch, holding the paper like it was a ticking bomb. Something wasn't right. As I looked down at baby Lila sleeping peacefully in her crib, a chill ran through me. Whatever was happening, it was just beginning. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the house made me jump. Every shadow looked like an omen. I sat by Lila's crib, watching her chest rise and fall, wondering what kind of parents would leave their baby behind with so little explanation. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe it was a business trip or a spontaneous getaway, but something about the formal guardianship paper gnawed at me. In the morning, I called Daniel's office, hoping for reassurance. The receptionist hesitated before answering. "Mr. Bennett resigned last week," she said. My stomach dropped. "Resigned? He didn't mention that." "He said he was moving abroad," she replied. My hands turned cold. I hung up and tried Claire's phone again. Still nothing. Panic started creeping in like slow-moving fog. I drove to their apartment, the blinds were drawn, the mailbox overflowing with flyers. When I rang the bell, no one answered. I asked the neighbor across the hall, an elderly man named Mr. Crane, if he'd seen them. "They left with suitcases 2 nights ago," he said. "Said they were going to Europe. I assumed you knew." I didn't even have the strength to respond. I drove home in silence, the road blurring beneath my tears. What kind of people would abandon their child like this? By the time I got back, Lila was awake, smiling up at me from her crib, completely unaware of the storm surrounding her. I picked her up, holding her close. "Don't worry, sweetheart," I whispered. "Grandma's here. I'll protect you." Days turned into weeks. No call, no message, no letter. I contacted the authorities, filed a report, and spoke to lawyers. The guardianship document was legally binding for 6 months, after which custody would revert to the parents if they returned. But no one knew where they were. It was as if Daniel and Claire had vanished into thin air. My lawyer, Mr. Ellison, advised me to stay calm. "As long as you have temporary guardianship, the child is under your care," he said. "If they don't return, we can petition for permanent custody." "But why would they do this?" I asked. "Why would my son abandon his own daughter?" He sighed. "Sometimes people run from responsibility or from debt. Did Daniel mention any financial problems?" I shook my head, though deep down I remembered a strange conversation months earlier when Daniel had said, "Things are tight right now, but I'll fix it." At the time, I thought it was just normal stress. I never imagined it was this. As the months passed, I began to build a life around Lila. She became my reason to get up every morning, my second chance at motherhood. We spent our days walking in the park, painting in the garden, laughing at silly songs. She was growing fast. Her first words were Nana and bird. Each time she smiled, I felt both joy and sorrow, knowing her parents were missing these moments. 6 months came and went. No one came for her. No call, no email, no trace. Mr. Ellison filed for permanent custody, and after a long hearing, the court granted it to me. The judge said, "You are clearly this child's best chance at stability." I left the courthouse both relieved and broken. I had gained a granddaughter but lost a son. 2 years passed. Lila was now 3, full of energy and curiosity. One afternoon, as we baked cookies, the doorbell rang. My heart leapt. When I opened it, Daniel stood there, thinner, older, eyes hollow. Behind him, Claire clutched her purse like a shield. "Mom," Daniel whispered, "we need to talk." I didn't know whether to hug him or scream. "Talk," I said, trembling. "After 2 years of silence?" He looked down. "We didn't mean for it to take this long. Things went wrong. We lost everything overseas. We thought we could rebuild before coming back for Lila." Claire added softly, "We didn't abandon her. We just couldn't provide for her." "So you left your baby behind?" My voice cracked. "Without a word? Do you have any idea what that did to me?" Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I know, Mom. I know. I thought I was protecting her. We made a mistake." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to forgive him. But when Lila came running into the hallway laughing, Daniel froze. "Is that—" he began. "Yes," I said, my voice softening. "That's your daughter." She looked up at him, curious but cautious. "Who's that?" "Nana." I knelt beside her. "That's your daddy, sweetheart." Daniel knelt, tears spilling down his face. "Hi, Lila," he whispered. She looked at him for a moment, then hid behind my legs. My heart shattered for both of them. "She doesn't remember us," Claire said, her voice breaking. "How could she?" I replied. "You left her when she was a baby." They stayed for an hour, trying to explain themselves. Something about failed investments, forged signatures, and debt collectors. I listened in silence. When they finally asked to take Lila home, I shook my head. "No," I said firmly, "not yet. You'll have to go to court. She's safe here." Daniel nodded slowly as if he already knew the outcome. They left quietly, and as their car disappeared down the street, I felt a strange peace wash over me. Maybe this was what closure looked like. Not perfect, not clean, but real. Months later, the court ruled in my favor. Lila remained with me permanently. Daniel and Claire moved to another state. We exchanged occasional letters, polite but distant. I never stopped loving my son, but I finally understood that love doesn't mean surrender. It means protecting what's right, even when your heart aches. Now, years later, as I sit on my balcony watching Lila play in the garden, I realize that sometimes the family you end up with isn't the one you expected. It's the one you fought for. The sun sets, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and I whisper to the wind, "I asked when the wedding is, and my daughter-in-law said, 'Oh, we got married yesterday.'" Those words once broke me, but now they are just part of my story, a chapter I survived. My name is Nora Bennett, and this is my life. If you liked my story, you can support me by making a donation so I can write more stories. Thank you in advance. And you, what would you do in this person's place? I would love to hear your opinion, so please share it with me in the comments. I'm always curious about what you all think, and also write me where you heard this story. For more life stories like this, like the video and subscribe to my channel. There are many other stories waiting for you. With heartfelt greetings. Until next time, Em.